Welcome to AFrame Lesson 3.4. In this video, we're going to discuss how we can create an overhead display using the camera and the cursor, as well as how to display text in our virtual world. So let's get to it. So just to orient you to what we have, it's a basic template with just a plane and a sky. We have a camera and a cursor, and let's just review a little bit of what that gives us. By default in our world, we're given a camera, but if we want to specify a cursor, we have to manually create the camera so we can add the cursor inside of it. The cursor is this little black dot that kind of serves as a target as to what we're going to interact with. Now this cursor, notice how it's always in front of us. That's a very useful tool because we can use this to create what's called a heads-up display. So before I do that though, let me just review how the text component works. It's actually quite simple. And let's do a hello world, little exclamation point. Let's give it a position of, let's say, 2, 2, and a -2. Let's change the color to black, make it a little easier to read. And then let's close it off. Oops, close it off properly. All right, so that's the text component. And just like anything else in our world, we can go around it. Now, you might notice that it disappears from the back side. Well, we can solve that relatively easy by just simply specifying side double, which is something that was covered in an earlier video about the plane, and as well as images. So let me show you that. And the nice thing about doing side double is that the text, kind of really feels like 3D, because when you go to the back side of it, you see the opposite. All right, so what we want to do is we want to take advantage of that text element as part of what's called a heads-up display. Now, often when you've played a game, typically you'll have what's called a heads-up display, where you might have a time here, score, health, mana, amount of ammo, whatever it is, somehow it's always in front of you. So we could take advantage of the fact that, excuse me, that the cursor does exactly that. So I'm going to take that text, put it inside the cursor, and let's just modify it a little bit. Let's say that we want to display the time here. And let's see, let's put the time on the left side. So let's do a -2, 2, and maybe a -1. And keep everything else. We can actually take the side double off. Reason being, we'll never be able to go from the other side. And you'll see here in a second. Let's see, did I do something wrong here? Let's modify these positions a little bit. Maybe it's too much in the world. All right, so there you go. So the value of 2 was too much. So we can see here that no matter where we move, that value of time is always in front of us. And that's because it's existing inside the cursor, which is always in front of us as well. I'm going to modify this a little bit. I'm going to make it a -2. So I really do want the time to appear up over here. That's much better. Again, you could always tweak it even more. One thing to note, though, with those positions, those are absolute positions. So depending on the size of your screen, you may lose part of that. So something just to consider. You could use a little bit of JavaScript to kind of always maintain it in the upper left-hand corner. But then that's a little bit beyond the scope of this video. All right, so let's do something a little more exciting with this, since it does say time. And let's go ahead and create a variable t to represent time. And let's do like a countdown timer, where inside of a recursive loop, we'll simply decrease this time. Now our job is we got to take that value of t and then actually populate it to this text element. So just like anything else, if we give it an ID, and we'll call it t as well, then we'll be able to interact with it. Actually, let me call it time. So let's create a variable for time, which is to represent that text element. So let's go ahead and grab it. We can use text document get element by ID. Of time. And then simply inside the loop, change that value attribute of the text element to the value of t. Sorry for the pause there. I was in mid-thought as I was typing. Let's do a little string interpolation. I'm a big fan of that. Definitely a lot easier than string concatenation. And let's give this a try. And there you go. So you can see the time is counting down. It's always in front of us. That's a good thing to have in terms of a game. If you notice, we kind of missed the 60. That's because we decreased the value of t first before we displayed it. So if we simply change the order, we'll be fine. Something else that's useful to have in a game is to kind of display a score. So let's go ahead and practice that as well. Let's call this score. Let's display score. And let's simply put this on the other side. And hopefully that should be easy enough. You know what? Maybe we won't move it over as much. Let's do a 1.5. So one thing to note when it comes to text elements, the center point is the left side and it grows out that way as compared to most other components where the center point is the middle. Because there's text that's being added, it doesn't compensate for the size of the text or the amount of text you have in the element. All right, cool. So it kind of feels like a game, but we're missing stuff. We need something on the screen in order to have a score. So for that, I have a little canned code here that I'm going to bring in. Now I'll kind of talk about it. So we've gone ahead and grabbed the score text element, grab the time text element, create a variable hit to keep track of how many things we've hit. We still got the t variable there. I've dynamically created spheres in the world with each of them having an event listener of click that when we click on it, we'll remove it from the world and increase hit by 1. And then update the score text element with that score. Then I've randomly positioned the spheres in the world and then I append it to the scene. So nothing too crazy there. All right, so there we go. You can see that no matter which way I turn, those elements, the text elements are on the screen. You might notice though, they can disappear inside some of the elements. Again, that's just a drawback of the virtual world. There are some things you can do to fix that. So let's actually click on one and see that the score increases. So there you go. We got a score of 1, score of 2, and then you could quickly make this into a game where you have to get rid of all the balls before the time is up. And then to kind of elevate this a little bit, you can actually have the balls move, incorporate this as part of a class. So that way, it just keeps the code cleaner. All right, so I think I've actually gotten rid of all the balls. I want to add one more thing to the heads up display so that you don't think that it's just text. Really, you can add anything you want to this. So what I'm going to do here, I have an image off to the side. And I'll let the image speak for itself based off of the file name. And let's go ahead and position this. Let's say we want it down a little bit. And should I want it center? Maybe I'll take it a little off-centered. Maybe a negative 0.5 as well. And let's leave it at 0. Let's see what that looks like. Again, this is all about tweaking once you start adding things to your virtual world. All right, so you can see here we have a hand with a gun. And the cool thing is that no matter where we go, that hand is always there, which is a common thing to see in these first-person type shooter games. So again, this is all part of this concept of a heads-up display using the cursor that is constantly in front of us. though I won't be demonstrating in this particular video, you could dynamically add elements to maybe an entity that's inside the cursor. For instance, instead of a score, maybe we could add little circles up here, or maybe just the plain little spheres up here to kind of represent how many things we shot. Again, the rest of this is left up to your creativity. So let's go back to our presentation. And let's review what we've done. So we took advantage of the fact that the cursor element is always in front of us. And with that cursor element, we can create what's called a heads-up display, where we can display text element, image elements. We can dynamically add things to perhaps an entity in it. Again, it's all up to you as to how you want to treat this heads-up display. Think of it as another area that you can dynamically create and interact with. The text element is a great element to display information on the screen. It's pretty simple. It has a value attribute. So hopefully you're excited about what you can do with a heads-up display, and enjoy.